And so for me growing up, I was about, I don't know, 7, 8 years old, and my perfect little world started to change. Now, my family at that point, my parents got divorced when I was 8. So, you can imagine, especially growing up in church, how that kind of sort of scandalized the church that our family got divorced. And there I was at that point as well, discovering that there were things about me that were very different than the other little boys on the playground. Now, while they were all too busy trying to, look up the girls' dresses on the monkey bars, I just wanted to know where they got their shoes. Seriously. And I was, I knew that I was different. Now, my dad, bless his heart, he tried everything he could to try to get me involved in sports. Do y'all think I've ever broken a sweat playing a sport? It would mess up my hair. And every good gay boy has to have enough hair product on hand. I don't think I would have enough for that, so that never did happen. He did, however, get me interested in action figures. Now, that was great. Now, G.I. Joe and He-Man were really big at our house. Now, He-Man and Skeletor never had a fight. They'd had sleepovers at Snake Mountain. That was as big of an argument as they would have, where they were going to sleep at Snake Mountain. And He-Man never wore a shirt, of course. But I think they did a little more harm than good in giving me those action figures than they realized, but, whatever. So, of course, in Kentucky and Paducah, we didn't have a whole lot to look forward to every year, but the one thing that I think I looked forward to was Christmas. Because I loved the decorations, I loved the tree, I loved all the good food. If I'm being honest, I loved the gifts, yes. And I loved the JCPenney Cadillac. Yes, I think some of you know where I'm going with this. But while all the other little kids were looking at what kind of action figures or sports toys or whatever else that was that they wanted Santa to bring them under the tree, I discovered that if you flipped over a few pages earlier, that you could see men in their underwear. Now, that was scandalous for the time, trust me. But I figured out why they called it a wish book. But yes, and so I was, this particular Christmas, I was looking at the catalog and looking at the men in their underwear. The step up from the He-Man figures, of course. And so I had this really nosy aunt. Now, do any of y'all have a relative that's really nosy like that? And when I say she's nosy, you could sneeze, and literally she would pick up the phone, dial one number, every phone in the family would ring. She'd get on there and say, okay, Justin sneezed. It was 5:45 and 35 seconds. It was about 5.3 seconds long, and afterwards he blew his nose. That's the kind of aunt that she was. She would tell every single bit of your business. So who would be standing over me this particular day? I'm checking out the catalog, but my dear, sweet, nosy aunt. And so, y'all, I panicked. And I did the only thing I knew how to do. I flipped over to the women in their bras. Because surely that would throw her off, right? So she took note and noticed it, and that was the end of it. So the next week was Christmas, and so while everyone was gathered together, it was my father, my grandparents, all my aunts and uncles, all my cousins, and everyone was gathered there to eat, and they were all eating, and so I decided that I was going to go in the other room and play present duty. Now, what that meant was that I was going to go separate everyone's gifts so that it would be easier to pass them out. Now, what that really meant was that I was going to see who got the most gifts. Because we want to be equal and fair, right? Now, unless I got more gifts than everyone else, and that would have been okay, right? So I'm pulling all the gifts out, looking through, and in the back, there's a gift that has no name on it. And so I'm doing that thing that all little kids do where you hold it up to the light to try to see through the wrapping paper, or you try to go sneak some Scotch tape so you can tear the corner off of the package and tape it back down when you're done. And while I'm scoping it out, my aunt comes in the room and she goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm just sorting through the gifts." And she said, "Well, what are you doing with that gift there?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. It doesn't have a name on it. I'm trying to figure out whose it is, and I can't put it in a pile." She said, "Well, that's a special gift that all the grandkids are going to draw numbers for." I said, "Oh, really?" She said, "Yeah." She said, "Whoever picks the number will get the prize. And I'm thinking, I sure would like to have that gift. She said, well, I'll tell you what. Since you know what's going on, I'd really like for you to get that gift too. So when the numbers are drawn, you pick the number 5. I thought, wow, I never win anything. This will be great. So just as she said, all the gifts were opened. The last gift comes out. We drew numbers. I picked the number 5, and I'm the lucky winner. So she says, go ahead and open up the package. So I'm opening it up in front of my whole family, and inside it was a picture, or a child's Pictionary game. Now, first off, I'm thinking, okay, so it wasn't a football or a baseball or anything like that I have no clue about. So we're safe there. Not really a Pictionary person, but it's all good. It's all good. So she said, well, why don't you go ahead and open it up so that you and your cousins can play? I'm thinking, okay, whatever. We don't have anything else to do. Fun was over with when I saw what the gift was. Isn't that how it always works? You really think it's something, you open it up and it's nothing. So I open up the child's Pictionary game, and inside there's no Pictionary game. To my horror, I reach in and pull out a little girl's training bra. I was 10 years old. And I remember my aunt follows it up and says, I thought you might, I saw you looking at those in the catalog, and I thought you might need one for the men you were looking at in their underwear. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh. So I run out of the room. They're all laughing, thinking it's funny. And, you know, the reason that I tell that story, it seems kind of harmless now, but, you know, with the whole bullying thing that's been going on, that's the very first experience of bullying that I can remember. And I think what makes it so different is that it came from someone in my very own family. Those are the people who are supposed to have your back, who are supposed to protect you. You know, when you're young like that, you're just trying to figure out who you are, where you're at in life, and all the voices that are surrounding you, sending you messages, sometimes do more harm than good. And for me, that was the first experience that I can remember. You know, this morning I said that we had lost 9 gay young adults in 2010 alone because they had been bullied and they took their lives. And so I wanted to take just a moment to mention their names so that the world will know what they failed to know. And that is simply that there's a community of young adults and LGBT adults who are still honoring their memory even today. And I have to have the paper because I want to make sure I get it all right. And that's sad that there's that many that you have to read it. But Billy Lucas was 15 years old from Indiana. He was the first one to take his life and was found hanging in his room after being called a fag one too many times. 17-year-old Cody Barker of Wisconsin took his life. He'd wanted to start a gay-straight alliance in his school, basically to protect his friends, even though it wasn't safe for him. 13-year-old Seth Walsh of California attempted to hang himself due to bullying, but failed. He was on life support for 10 days before he finally died. 18-year-old Rutgers student Tyler Clementi was filmed by his roommate having sex with another young man. The roommate streamed the footage on the internet, and when Tyler was outed by the footage, he simply drove his car to an abandoned lot in New Jersey and jumped off the George Washington Bridge. His last Facebook post said, "Jumping off the GW Bridge. Sorry." 13-year-old Asher Brown shot himself in the head with a gun he'd found in his parents' home. Earlier that day, he'd come out to his father, who had accepted him completely. But, however, the kids at his school had ridiculed him from everything from his size to his sexuality to the fact that he was a Buddhist. The day before he died, he was pushed down 2 flights of stairs by one of the bullies. Openly gay 19-year-old Raymond Chase in Rhode Island was found dead in his dorm room, where he'd hung himself. And 17-year-old Felix Sacco, a senior in Massachusetts, jumped from an overpass onto U.S. Route 1 during rush hour traffic. He died later that day of massive head injuries. Friends had indicated that he'd had a history of being bullied and that he had tried to see a guidance counselor the morning of his death, but was turned away and left the building in tears. And just when you think everything kind of sort of is getting a little bit better, a few weeks ago we lost Jamie Rodemeyer, little 13-year-old kid from New Jersey who had been ridiculed and bullied by so many kids at school. And so he got online and he found the resource for It Gets Better. So he got online and he was so encouraged, and he made a video about it, and he basically told them, you know, that he had had inspirations in his life like Lady Gaga, who told him that he was okay. And he basically wanted to thank people online because by what they had said, he knew that people didn't want him to die. And when the kids at school found out what he had done and that he'd posted the video, they only ridiculed him worse. And so tragically, he took his own life. So, you know, it's so important that we watch our friends, our children, our family, and how they're treated. You know, you don't have to be 17 years old to feel bullied. You could be 45 years old. You could be 27. Doesn't matter. Sometimes we're so blinded by our fear that we can't see the love and acceptance that's awaiting us. Sometimes we hit another wall and we fall down and we can't get back up. Those are the times that we need each other and God the most.
Dear God, this prayer is for the blind sparrow who cannot see at all, who can only fly the straight and the narrow, till he hits another wall. That you'll account for him like you do for everyone. But will you take into account he's done the best he can? I've heard that you're a merciful God of love and sympathy. Then for heaven's sake, please guide him straight or give him eyes to see. Dear God, this prayer is for the blind sparrow who cannot see at all, and who can only fly the straight and narrow, till he hits another wall. If you will not heal his eyes and stop his wounds from bleeding, then gently reach into his soul and stop his heart from beating. Now usually, religiously, I pray for someone else, but this prayer is for the blind sparrow that lives inside myself. Dear God, this prayer is for the blind sparrow who cannot see at all, who can only fly the straight and narrow, till he hits another